Strong Enough merch is now available. Go to strongenoughpod.com and see all the things that you can get to show your strong enough pride, as well as remind people and yourself that you are strong enough and you are worth it. Welcome to the Strong Enough podcast, where we talk about the challenges and celebrate the triumphs of people just like you. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is going to talk about how the 12-step recovery program changed her life, but not for what you may suspect. She's also going to talk about how boundaries have made her better and why being fulfilled on her own helps her give back to others. Please help me welcome Barb Nangle. Hi, Barb. How's it going today?
Great, Claudia. I'm super excited to be on your show. I can't wait to have this conversation.
I am super excited as well. And just from the tidbits of conversation that we have had already that everyone else isn't privy to, I think we're going to get along just fine. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun today.
I agree. Yeah.
I would love it if you would start by telling the audience a little about yourself.
Okay. So I am 60 years old right now. And I think the most important parts of my story begin in 2015 when I hit a codependent bottom. And if people don't know what that means, I didn't either. So I had never heard the word codependent despite having been in therapy for 37 years, not continuously, but close, reading just scores of self-help books, workshops, retreats, workbooks, uh, self-help things, support groups, spiritual things, all that stuff. I had done a ton of work. And so when I heard this word, I was like, wait, what is this? So a codependent person is someone who essentially is focused on whatever's going on outside themselves, typically other people, what those people are doing, thinking, saying, often what they're thinking about you. And we are fixers, rescuers, savers, constantly in other people's business. And I didn't know that was what was going on. And I ended up getting into 12-step recovery, first for codependence. Very quickly afterwards, I, by chance, hello, higher power, went to an ACA meeting. ACA stands for Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, which I didn't know I qualified for because I don't identify as the child of an alcoholic. And I never had heard the and dysfunctional families part of that fellowship title, but I had heard of ACOA for as long as I could remember, and found out that I had what's called relational trauma, which is the result. I call it like the continual sort of drip, drip, drip of emotional invalidation in my family. And for the first 6 months I was in that program, I kept being like, I have the traits that they're talking about, but I don't get how it happened. And when I started to understand that the absence of good things happening can result in trauma, I was like, okay. And then a year into both of those programs, I decided to stop going to Codependence Anonymous because it was like maybe a 75% fit for me, whereas ACA was 100% fit for me. And that also turned out to be yet another higher powered moment because the meeting I stopped going to with Coda was Mondays. And I got invited to an Overeaters Anonymous workshop with a friend of mine. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a compulsive overeater. I didn't even know that that was a thing. And never mind that I was. So I'm now down over 100 pounds from my top weight. You can see I have like lots of extra, whatever you want to call that, flab skin or whatever, on my arms, on my belly, on my legs. And it's not that I enjoy looking at it, but I don't hate my body. And I've never was someone who like loathed my body, but I did not like my body. I will tell you that. And the fact that I can like look at that, and actually one of my friends in my eating recovery program, when I got to goal weight, she was like, are you gonna have surgery? And I was like, are you kidding me? I fucking grew that. Like, this is a badge of honor. Like, I'm not having that removed. So I'll tell you, Claudia, after all that self-work that I had been doing before recovery, the way I think of it is that stuff like scratched the surface of the iceberg of my life. Recovery melted the iceberg. So for me, the 12 steps are where it's at. I have been deeply and profoundly changed in ways that I just didn't know. Like, I didn't even know that codependence was a thing, never mind that I had that. And I remember the therapist I was with at the time, I remember saying to her, like, what the fuck else don't I know about myself? I said, I don't feel like I got hit in the head with a baseball with this news that I am codependent. I feel like I got hit in the head with a planet because I have been trying. I've been on a journey. I'm introspective. I've done all this work. And she said, Barb, I think for you that codependence is a unifying concept. It pulls together a whole bunch of things about yourself that you knew, you just didn't know that they were a cluster that were related. And at first, Claudia, I thought she was saying it to be nice. But as time went on and I learned more, I realized that it was really true. But all of the therapists I had over those years, nobody ever told me that I did not have boundaries. Nobody told me I had a victim mentality. Nobody told me that I lied all the time. I truly believed that I was an honest person before I got into recovery, but yet I lied about cigarettes, I lied about weed, I lied about alcohol, I lied about relationships, but mostly I lied in the people-pleasing department. So I would say things were okay with me when they were not okay. I wouldn't speak up about things. I would say that I didn't like things that I actually did like because I was afraid to be judged by people. Here's an example. So I was a closeted Hallmark Channel fan. And this only happened like, maybe 10-ish in the last 10 years. But for the first few years, I didn't want anybody to know because I'm like, oh, they're going to think it's sappy. Well, here's the thing. It is sappy. And I like sappy. And I get to like whatever the fuck I like. So I wouldn't say that I like things that I did and all that. So I did a lot. I was really dishonest. And now I'm like a really honest person. And I think for me, like I've become a boundaries coach because this codependence thing was that's like, I think of it as my core wound was codependence, and the antidote to codependence is boundaries. So ultimately I became a boundaries coach because I want for people to have the freedom that I've gotten. And I think for me, when I look back at like what was the main trigger for me to go from no boundaries to having boundaries, I would say the core of that is that I went from caring more what other people thought about me to what I think of me. And so this doesn't mean I don't care at all what other people think of me. Of course I do. What it means is that I was willing to throw my integrity out the window so that people would approve of me. And mainly it wasn't like I didn't understand how much I was seeking other people's approval. But what I think I was more seeking was not getting their disapproval. So like I did not want people to think that I was a bad person. And to me, bad person equals someone who says no. Well, here's the thing. Good people tell the truth. Good people say yes when they mean yes, and they say no when they mean no. So I shifted from being so invested in other people's approval to caring more about being an honest woman of integrity. So I want you to like me, but if I have to throw my integrity out the window to get you to like me, bye-bye. Like I'm not doing that because one of the things that I've learned in this journey of recovery and especially boundary building is that when we're dishonest, it's like we have cracks in our foundation. And I remember early in recovery looking up the definition of the word integrity. And there's two different ones. One of them is like the one we think about, like you do what you say you're going to do. And there's another one about the physical world. Like a bridge that has integrity does not have cracks in its foundation. And I remember looking at them and like somehow, and I'm smart, okay, but I like couldn't internalize like, what is the connection between these two? And I couldn't like hold on to the definition. So I put them on a sticky note on my mirror for like a year. And I was like, oh, it's wholeness that the two of them have in common. I'm whole when I have integrity. I don't have cracks in my foundation when I tell the truth. So one of the things I do with my clients is I have them start with what are your most important values? And then we go from there because that's how you know when and where to set boundaries. I didn't understand that. Like I learned how to build boundaries through this sort of like meandering haphazard pathway through the 12 steps of recovery over like, I don't know, 2 to 3 years. And I still continue to learn more, but like the bulk of the learning happened in that time. And I, like, on reflection, realized the way you know when and where to set boundaries is by what's important to you, what you value. So I start my clients with that because I like figured that out later. And I also figured out how, like, excuse me, I figured out like an accelerated path so that other people don't have to take 2 to 3 years through a meandering path. Like I can coach them through that. So, some of the major benefits of my 12-step recovery and especially my boundaries are, like, I would say the one that most people like to hear about is that I'm in the first happy and healthy romantic relationship of my life. So I happen to be a heterosexual woman. So I've always dated men, and every man I've ever dated has been emotionally unavailable. And I always thought like that was the pattern, and that is, but really the pattern was codependence. And what I discovered was that the reason that I was attracted to and attractive to men who are emotionally unavailable is because I was emotionally unavailable, which makes total sense. Because what emotionally available man is ever going to want to be invested in a relationship with a woman who's not emotionally available? So I am in a very happy and healthy relationship with my sweetheart. In October, it will be 5 years that we've been together. He is also in recovery. And we are both really clear. This is way different than anything we've ever been through. He was married for 10 years and then he was married for 25 years. I've never been married. But I've been in, when I did my relationship inventory in recovery, 28 different relationships. Now, some of those are full blown. We lived with each other. We're clear. We're boyfriend and girlfriend. Some of them were, I fucked their dick. Some of them were, I dated them a few times, that sort of thing. But like the people that were worthy of landing on a relationship inventory, there were 28 of them. And, every one of them, and I could see my codependence get worse as time went on, which is really, really sad. So I no longer have victim mentality, which is amazing because I could spot victims a mile away because I was going to rescue those people. But I'm not like the quintessential victim. I've never walked around being like, woe is me, the world is against me. I'm not a pessimist. I'm like an eternal optimist, inspirational, motivational person. And the thing that sort of like opened the door for me to be able to see that I had victim mentality was when I was doing the relationship inventory, my thought was, well, if he would just fill in the blank, then everything would be okay. So that was me acting like I got nothing to do with the relationship, which is kind of funny because as long as I can remember, when I would talk to friends, men or women, who were complaining about their partners, I would say, you're 50% of that relationship, which means you're 50% responsible for the status of the relationship. So I could see and say that about other people, but not about me. So in recovery, I started to be like, oh, this is me acting like I have nothing to do with the status of the relationship. And once I saw that in my romantic relationships, I saw it in my relationship with my boss. So when I got into recovery, I'd been at Yale University as a program coordinator for urban education programs for 17 years, working for the same boss, super codependent relationship. And I was always like, well, if she would just show up on time, if she would follow through, if she would do what she said she was going to do, if she would stop blowing people off. And then I started seeing it in my friendships and in my family. And I was like, oh my God. And here's one way that I think a lot of people can relate to that this my victim mentality cleaned up very quickly. Traffic. I used to get so pissed off when I was on the highway and there was traffic. And when I kind of rolled things back and looked at what was going on, I clearly had this subconscious belief that there should not be traffic when I'm on the highway. Now, highways were built for traffic, Claudia. So that's ridiculous, right? And I didn't know that I had it, but I clearly had this attitude like traffic is happening to me. Not traffic is happening, traffic is happening to me. And I think a lot of people can identify with that. And as soon as I had that epiphany, my driving cleaned up massively and my Like, I wouldn't say it was to the level of road rage, but I definitely took out all my frustration at the world in my car. And my therapist helped me to see that because I was never telling people what was okay and what was not okay, I was never telling people when I was upset about things, that had to go, that had to come out of me somehow. And I would take it out in the car where only I was affected by it. And that really got cleaned up. So, I mean, I could go on and on and on about the benefits of recovery, but I think I've been talking quite a bit. So I think I'll stop there and just see what you want to say or ask, see where it goes.
I have a lot to ask and say. I want to start though with one of your very first sentences was that you are 60 years old. For those who can see you right now, none of us are believing it. I do have a knack on this podcast for having guests who are clearly vampires and who do not look their age at all. So
Mhm.
you are now in that club because without photo identification proof, I simply can't believe that you're 60. So
Yeah. It's
moving
not
on.
because I took good care of myself. I abused the shit out of myself for the first 52 years of my life. So it's not, it's genes. I got nothing to do with it.
So good genes, whatever it is, it's working for you.
Mhm.
I want to talk about codependence for a minute because I kind of think you blew my mind. And what I mean by that is, as you were defining it and describing it, I was always under the impression that two people were codependent, or it's the co, and so both of
Mhm.
them
Mhm.
have crappy issues and kind of get sucked together. It
Mhm.
sounds like, though, what you're saying is that one person can be codependent and then they seek out or they become engaged in experiences or people or relationships where they are concerned about how they look and feel to the other person and want to fix the other person if that's the case. So, am I hearing that correctly? Are you blowing my mind right now?
Yeah, yeah, you're hearing that correctly. But the thing is, like, person who is codependent is not likely to form long-standing relationships with other people that don't have some level of codependence. And it is a hard concept to wrap your mind around. I was like, the first couple years, I was like, what the hell is this codependence thing? And I remember, actually, let me indulge you with a story of how I hit a codependent bottom. So I had in the fall of 2014 started volunteering on a project for my church serving homeless people. Right before that project started, a homeless guy named Dan started coming as a parishioner to my church, and he and I became very friendly. And one day, and so I felt like it was like the universe sending me a homeless person to get to know as a human being so that when I'm serving homeless people in this project, they're not the homeless, but they're individualized humans with stories, you know? So that felt like divine intervention to me. So one time during a snowstorm, I invited him to stay at my home, which I now know is not normal. And he did. And then he stayed another time. And within a few weeks, he was practically living with me. And then in a couple months, I felt trapped in my own home. He was an addict. He was an alcoholic. He may very well have been a narcissist. He fucked with my head in a way that I had never experienced before. And it was absolutely awful. And he was still around when I first got into recovery. And I mean, that emotional feeling of hitting the codependent bottom. I have never experienced that, even in romantic relationships that I had been in for years. It was just brutal. And it was like I mentioned earlier, in my codependence got worse over time. This is like in an addiction recovery program, we talk about the addiction is a progressive illness. Well, I think that codependence is essentially an addiction to other people. So it's progressive. So one time I remember thinking, I cannot count on Dan for anything. And I was like, wait a minute. Yes, I can. I can count on him to count on me. Codependent. And I was like, oh, I get it. But here's the thing, I was acting like that was his fault. I trained him to be dependent on me. So, like, I feel like there's all these facets to codependence. So I think maybe I have blown your mind. But like the typical codependent is somebody like me in a relationship with an addict who's trying to get the addict to stop, who is trying to get the addict into rehab, to go to recovery. They're policing their behavior, they're pouring their drink down the, you know, they're cleaning up after them, they're making excuses for them, they're essentially enabling. They think that they're helping, which is why Al Anon exists. And it's the second 12-step recovery program that was ever invented, because the things that we do that seem sort of natural to quote help our addicts and our alcoholics recover are actually counterintuitive to what's going to work for them. And what we tend to do is completely negate ourselves and neglect ourselves and focus all of our attention on them. And so one of the first things you learn to do in Al-Anon or in Coda or in ACA is keep the focus on yourself. And it's super hard. Like that's one of the most important things that I teach my clients. I say keep the focus on yourself so much. In fact, I have a client who does cartooning and designs cards. And she designed a card for me that has like a checklist and it says, keep the focus on yourself, keep the focus on yourself. And then it has like 3 different ways of saying it. Like that's how much she knows. Like I say, keep the focus on yourself. And what I mean by that is, like it's not what they're doing. Like, what are you doing? Like, what do you actually want to do? Or like, is this really my business? Or like, am I taking good care of myself? That's what I mean. And like a conversational way to keep the focus on yourself could be, like you're driving like a maniac. Well, keeping the focus on yourself would be, I feel unsafe. Right. So when you keep the focus on yourself in conversation, you're much more likely to have actual communication. And when you keep the focus on them, you're more likely to have conflict and an inflammatory conversation. So this keeping the focus on yourself is super hard when you've been focused on other people and like other people, places, and things your whole life.
I love that you gave that last example because I've heard that in other contexts where it's about the I statements. When
Mm,
you are trying to avoid conflict and instead of saying you did this, you made me feel,
mhm,
if you can turn
mhm,
that around and as you mentioned, when this happens, I feel unsafe
mm.
or I
Right,
don't feel heard or whatever it is, it
right,
leads to more productive
mm,
conversation.
right.
Why do you think, though, it's so hard for so many of us to put the focus on ourselves without feeling selfish?
Well, because we have this bullshit myth in our culture that putting yourself first is selfish, that self-care is selfish. I don't know like who came up with that. I think it's because of we have a capitalistic, individualistic society, and that you need to be looking outside yourself because you've got to go to the marketplace to fill whatever that need is that you have. And I think it's especially true for women that we're taught that like self-sacrificing is noble. So I'm not advocating that people never help anyone. So like I was a volunteeraholic before I got into recovery. And when I got in recovery, I was like, I'm quitting everything and I'm going to volunteer for Barb. Well, I'll tell you what, Claudia, I now give per hours per week more service to my community than I ever did before. But it comes from a place of abundance rather than a place of lack. And I mean that in 2 different ways. One, I went to the world to say, like me, like me, like me. Like I'm trying to get something. I'm trying to get approval. I'm trying to get, that sort of thing from the world. So that means I'm going to the work from a place of lack to make up for something I don't have. And I'm also going to the world from a place of lack because I'm fucking drained because I give, 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 don't take care of myself, put my needs aside, cancel things for myself to take care of other people. So I'm coming from a place of lack. Now I go to the world to give from a place of abundance. And I mean that like this. Number one, I am choosing, I am not compelled to help. I am giving what I have to give. So, what I have to give is love because I fill myself with self love first. And two, I fill my cup. So, I pour from the overflow, not from the cup. So, I never have an empty cup anymore because I fill it every single day primarily through my conscious contact with my higher power. I have a pretty long morning routine and a pretty decent evening routine and various other things that I do. And, when I talk to people outside of recovery and I tell them all of the things that I do, because I pray, I journal, I meditate, I have a yoga routine, I have readings I do every day, they're like, oh my God, I'm never going to do that. I'm like, listen to me. You want me doing this stuff because I'm an asshole when I don't do all those things because I'm trying to get you to do stuff for me. I'm trying to get you to fill my needs. And like, if everybody was meeting their own needs, oh my God, can you imagine? Actually, what just popped in my head was I remember hearing or seeing years ago, somebody said, this is a depiction of hell. Everybody's at this giant feast table with all kinds of food on it, and they have these really long forks strapped to their arms, and they can't feed themselves and they're starving. So they have all this food in front of them. Heaven, same exact thing, but they're feeding each other, right? So, but in that case, everybody's feeding everybody. It's not three people feeding everybody, right? So like, it's good and noble to help other people. It is not good and noble to help other people by sacrificing yourself. That's bad. And also, if you're a mom, you're teaching your kids, you're expendable. You're not expendable. You deserve rest. You deserve relaxation. You deserve to take care of yourself. It is not selfish. It is actually selfless to put yourself first, because when you filled your cup, you have more to pour from, right? And when you choose where you're going to give, as opposed to feeling you are compelled to give because that's what nice girls do, then that's a completely different ball game. Like for me, learning how to build healthy boundaries is ultimately about choice and freedom. Like freedom to choose, what do I actually want to do, and then doing it. And like, not only do I get the reward when I set the boundary by saying, you know what, that doesn't really work for me. And I get the reward because I showed up for myself in a way that I never did before. But I also get the reward of the actual boundary. So I get to do the things that give me energy, and I get to stop doing things that drain me of energy. And I've really been astonished, Claudia, to see how much like boundaries permeate every single area of your life. So when you clean up your boundaries, it's amazing how many, like there's like this domino effect of so many other things that get cleaned up in your life.
I love when you talked about being able to give more now in a sense than you were before, and what
Mhm,
it made
mhm.
me think of was fulfillment, that you have to
Yes. Oh,
fulfill yourself, and when you do that,
mm.
then you can give to others because you're not
Right,
looking for that fulfillment
right.
elsewhere.
Yes, I love that word. Okay, I just need to like let that sink. Fulfillment. Yes, fulfillment. I'm totally stealing that from you. I never use that word, but you're right. I'm fulfilled, so I don't need to go to the world or another person to get fulfillment from. Yes. Oh my God, I love it. I love it.
You're making breakthroughs today, and I love
Yes.
that.
Yes.
I wanna talk a little bit about the 12-step program
Okay.
because I know and I think a lot of others really identify that with an addiction of an alcoholic, drug
Mhm,
addiction,
mhm,
things like that versus
mhm,
codependence
mhm,
or overeating,
mhm,
and
mhm,
I would love for you to talk about if the program is essentially the same as
mhm.
it is in those others and why you think it works.
Yeah. So let me start with why I think it works. Number one, they're spiritual programs. So you don't have to believe in God, but you do have to believe that there's some kind of power out there that is greater than you. Because if you could use your own individualized power to change your life, you would have done it, right? So it's a spiritual program. Number two, it's a group program where you're with people who have the same life experience of you, at least with the addiction, maybe not life, family story and all that stuff, but they get you in a way that nobody else does. And they've recovered. So, like they share with you, here's what I did. I mean, maybe this worked for me, maybe it'll work for you. They don't tell you you have to do this. They say, give it a try. Number three, it's a stepwise program. There's like step one, do this. Step two, do that. Step three, do that. And then there's some synergy between all of those elements of the spiritual nature of the program, the group nature of the program, and the fact that it's, that's a stepwise program. And so I think the distinction between the kinds of recovery, the substance kinds of programs you're talking about, and the things that I'm in is a substance addiction versus a process addiction is what they call it. And I'm not like an expert on this, but essentially a process addiction is more like an addiction to things like gambling or people like, codependence, that sort of thing, a sex addiction, that sort of thing. And so the programs are the same. And so Overeaters Anonymous to me sort of feels almost like a combination of both because I have a substance addiction to food. For me, I'm a compulsive overeater and sugar addict. And I would say the vast majority of people in Overeaters Anonymous are also sugar addicts, but not everybody is. And some people it's just food. So one of the ways we manage that, well, actually, let me back up and say that for those who don't know about addiction, what I learned in recovery was that addiction is a twofold illness. There's a physical component and there's a mental component. So the physical component, and I'll use alcohol as an example because most people can identify with that, is that if I'm an alcoholic and I ingest alcohol, my body has an abnormal reaction to the regular everyday person. And another way to describe abnormal reaction is allergy. An allergy is an abnormal reaction, right? So they have an allergy to alcohol. And here's the abnormal reaction. When they ingest it, they crave more. It doesn't matter how much fucking destruction has happened in their body, in their life, in their family. They crave more and they cannot not crave it unless they stop. They abstain from taking in the alcohol. So stopping taking in the alcohol deals with the physical component because you will eventually stop having the craving. Well, then there's the really insidious part, and that's the mental component. So the way we talk about it in recovery is I got a disease that tells me I don't have a disease. So my disease will say things like if I was an alcoholic, well, I haven't had a drink in 90 days. I must not be an alcoholic. Well, I can have just one despite never having just one ever, having volumes and decades of evidence that you can't. So we call it this strange mental twist. Well, the way we deal with the physical component is to abstain from ingesting the allergen. And the way we deal with the mental component is through the 12 steps of recovery. So we need a power greater than ourselves. And then we also need to kind of take a look at our lives and see what we've been doing, clean that shit up. We need to make amends for the things, that we have done wrong. And I think that the things that people, if they know anything about 12-step recovery are, step 4, take a searching and fearless moral inventory of your life. And step 9 is make amends, except for when to do so would harm other people or ourselves or others, harm others. So, and we're included in those others. And the way that I experienced the amends process was I literally, like, Claudia, I swear to God, I felt like I cleaned that shit off of my soul. Like I am not carrying around guilt and shame because I'm a different person now. I did those things and they were wrong and they were bad. And I have done the best I can to make up for them in this lifetime as just a regular human being. So when it comes to Overeaters Anonymous, and I know this is true in dating like people that have like sex addictions and that sort of things. I have a red light, yellow light, green light list of foods. So anything on my red light list, if I eat that, I have broken my abstinence. So it's basically for me, anything that has anything to do with sugar, any natural sugar, like honey, agave nectar, I don't care. I can't. And if I'm going to buy a food that has a label on it, if it has sugar ingredient number 5 or higher, I don't eat that. Right. So that's on my red light list. Yellow light list is like a slippery slope. Like maybe it's something I can have it under certain conditions. Like I can have it at home, but not out. Or like I can't go to a Mexican restaurant where they have the chips on the table and have chips because that is a bottomless barrel of chips to me. But at home, I weigh and measure my chips. So my tortilla chips, I can eat them. That's a good example. And then green light list is foods I'm never going to binge. I'm never going to eat. And speaking of binge, I will say, because a lot of people don't understand this about compulsive overeating. Yeah, I binged. I was much more of a grazer. Like I was on the seafood diet. I eat it, right? And then I have a red light, yellow light, green light food behavior list. So what that means, if I'm doing any of the behaviors on my red light list, I've broken my abstinence. So if I am, for me personally, everybody's list is different. If I'm eating out of a package, it's bottomless. I've broken my abstinence. If I am eating fast food, I didn't compulsively eat fast food. Well, I mean, I ate, fast, but um I just like, I don't need to be eating that. Something's wrong in my life if I'm eating compulsive, if I'm eating fast food. If I'm not planning my food and just sort of winging it, that sort of thing. And then yellow light is like slippery slope behaviors. And then green light is, it's okay, for me to do those sorts of things. And the reason that we have those is because some people, they don't have a specific food that is their problem. They just compulsively eat anything. And so that's where the behaviors really matter. So many, many, many people in food recovery programs plan, weigh, and measure their food and also report to their sponsor what they're going to eat, because, and I do that because it makes me feel safe. Because when I measure things, there's no game playing in my head. There's no like, well, I can probably have a little bit more, because I need to be, precise about what I'm doing. So I hope that that answers your question about like this difference between these two things. Now, when it comes to a dating plan, you're going to have red light, yellow light, green light behaviors. Like if this is happening in the relationship, I've broken my abstinence.
It's so interesting to me. First off, I do want to take a moment to say congratulations on losing over 100 pounds, because that is a feat. And so many people turn to surgical methods or other methods. And if that works for them, that's fine. But to step into it and do it the way that you did it, and to be proud of your skin that you're carrying around
Yeah.
now, I think is amazing. So
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I found really interesting is when you talked about weighing and measuring and like kind of being very specific about doing those things. I have suffered from an eating disorder. And so
Mhm.
for me, those would be the red light behaviors, because when I get into a counting or a measuring, that's when I go down the slope, because then it's like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, let me write down this 100 calories.
Mhm.
Hmm. Do I really need to eat that? Like, that's
Mhm.
100 calories that I mean, I don't need that 100 calories.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's very interesting to me how our unique circumstances can
Mhm.
affect our
Mhm.
plans and
Mhm.
our red, yellow, and green behaviors. So I just want people to
Mhm.
understand that what works for Barb might not
Mhm.
work for them,
Mhm.
but the
Mhm.
idea of the planning is what
Mhm.
matters.
Right. Yeah. And I will say, like, I'm in recovery with people who are anorexic and recovering, we're anorexics and bulimics, and actually in recovery with people who are both compulsive overeaters and restrictors. And
Mhm.
that's a toughie because they have a real fine line. So I would say that I know that there are anorexics and bulimics who do plan, weigh, and measure, but they have a floor. I have a ceiling.
Mhm.
Right, so they have a floor below which they don't go in terms of calories or servings or whatever, and I have a ceiling above which I don't go. I'm never gonna restrict my food, so we don't have to worry about me having a floor. But the people who are both, restrictors and compulsive overeaters, they have like a middle ground. Like they need to be within, they have a floor and a ceiling because they need to have that. But also there are people, it's triggering for them to weigh and measure. So they're not going to do it. And that's why your red light, red, yellow, green light foods and behaviors are your individualized list specifically for you. Now, there are some eating programs out there where everybody doesn't eat sugar and everybody doesn't eat white flour. That's not Overeaters Anonymous. There are other ones like that. And if that works for other people, that's fine. And that's because for some people, their sugar allergy is so sensitive that eating any carbohydrates or any white flour just metabolizes for them in such a way that it ignites that craving. I'm not one of those people. I do eat white flour, not frequently, but I do. But I know plenty of people who just don't. And then I know some people who don't even eat carbs at all because it's just such a problem for them.
I want to ask you, when it comes to the 12 steps, and so you get to step 12 and it's like, yay, I'm finished. But you're not finished, right? Because you have talked
Correct.
about your daily routines, your habits,
Mhm,
the things that you
mhm,
continue to do. So, will you speak about the importance of, yay, I
mhm,
graduated, but that's not
mhm.
the end?
Yeah, so it's not graduating. So, there's kind of a debate in recovery about whether you're recovering or recovered. And there are
Mm.
some people that say, when the compulsion has been lifted, you're recovered. And that makes sense to me. That's just not a word that I identify with, but it's built into the 12 steps that you will continue to do the work. So a lot of people will say, I live in 10, 11, and 12. What they mean is I live in steps 10, 11, and 12. So step 10 is continue to take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So for many of us, that means we take a nightly inventory. I'm one of those people. Step 11 is continue to take or make conscious contact with it. I can't remember the exact wording, but it's about praying and meditating
Mhm.
and like continuing that. It's not starting it, it's like continuing it and like using your higher power. And part of in my recovery program, part of that conscious contact is a nightly inventory. And in the morning, saying, God, please remove from me, please direct my thinking today, etc. And then step 12 is there's several parts to step 12. So it's, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we continue to carry the message to those who still suffer and to carry the message of recovery. Wait, I'm screwing it up. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry the message to those who still suffer, and there's something else. I can't believe I'm forgetting about it because I literally like read and say these things every day. But the idea is that so the spiritual awakening, what that means is I'm changed. So it doesn't necessarily mean you were visited by God or angels or anything like that, though that does happen to some people. It means I have changed in this deep and profound way that nothing ever did before me. And then carrying the message means that we help other compulsive overeaters, or we help other adult children, or we help other codependents, or other alcoholics or addicts. And maybe that means just within the meetings, but it also means like out in your life. If I will do like something like this. So let's say I'm donating blood and the person that's taking my blood pressure is super heavy. And I don't say, hey, you know what? I went to Overeaters Anonymous and down over 100 pounds. Cause we say this is a program of attraction, not promotion.
Mhm.
And so if they give me my blood pressure, I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. I used to be on blood pressure medication. And if they say, oh, what happened? Then I say, oh, well, I lost over 100 pounds. And then if they say, oh, well, how'd you do that? Then I tell them. That's a way to carry the message that preserves the dignity of the person. Because if somebody ever came to me when I was heavy, which people do, like people
Mm.
feel like they need to tell you about your health and your weight and what you should be doing, which is just ridiculous.
Like, you don't know because 'cause you're
Like, right.
there.
Like I know more about health and fitness and
Mhm.
nutrition than most medical professionals because I've read every goddamn book on the
Mm.
planet. So you telling me like I don't want to I want to attract somebody to let them know like that compulsion that you have can end. When I went to my first OA meeting, it wasn't even a regular weekly support meeting. It was like a workshop with speakers and stuff. And when I left, it was probably 3 days before it occurred to me that I might lose weight because what I got was the obsession and the game playing in my head could go away, which I didn't even like, I don't even know that I knew that it was happening because it was so much a part of me. And I'm thinking of this. You asked me before we got on to send you some pictures. I just recently had portraits, a photo shoot for my 60th birthday done, one of which is a black and white of me without my shirt on. So you can see my belly. I'm going to send that to you as one of the photos so that people can see, like, because I appear to be thin to people, and I am. I'm a size 8, I'm in the single digits, which is amazing. But underneath the clothing, there's a lot going on down there, well, out here too.
But you're not ashamed of that, you're proud of that, of what's
No.
going on.
Yeah, yeah. I will say, so I've been at my goal weight for 5.5 years now, so I'm really used to this. But for a while there, because it's really interesting, on my arms, it's literally just my upper arm. My lower arm is
Right.
normal size. My shoulder is normal size, but my upper arm. So wearing a sleeveless shirt, I was always like, now I'm like, I don't care. I'm hot. I'm going to wear a sleeveless shirt,
And I hope
And if
you mean
anybody,
hot, like attractive.
no, I meant hot, like, I meant hot temperature. I do not like, I mean, my sweetheart thinks I'm hot.
Bitch,
So
you're beautiful, so stop
that's
that.
all I care about. I want him to think I'm hot. And I feel hot when I'm with him. Here's another thing. This might be TMI, probably not, whatever. I wear lingerie now and I own it. Like I always wanted to wear lingerie before in my life, even because I grew up thin. I didn't tell you that. I would say the switch sort of flipped for me in my early 20s to becoming a
Mhm.
compulsive overeater. And I battled with 35-ish pounds in my 20s, and then it was more like 80 in my early 30s, and then 100 and all that stuff. So there were times in my life, not long, that I was thin, and I always wanted to wear lingerie, but I was so like uncomfortable in my own skin. And I'm not talking about body weight. I'm talking about, this is the trauma recovery that I'm talking
Mhm.
about. I own it. And he doesn't give a shit that I have flab. He's like, she's wearing lingerie for me. Like, he loves that. And one time we were talking and I was saying, like, he loves my thighs, which is crazy because they sag, right? And he goes, when we're making love, there's no sagging. There's no, like, literally doesn't see it. It's not happening. He's like, there's a naked woman who wants me, and she wants me so bad that she's like putting on lingerie to be hot and sexy. It's like, this is the freedom of like, some of it has to do with boundaries because I'm able to say what I actually want, which is, I want to wear lingerie. Can we take a look at some and you tell me what you think is hot? And I'll let you know if I feel like I can wear it. And I'm pretty much like, I'll try anything once, And so it's like, so I have so much more fun and freedom in my life than I ever did before. And I thought I had fun. I thought I had freedom. I didn't know I wasn't comfortable in my own skin.
And how amazing is that now to really truly feel that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my 50s was by far my best decade ever, and I'm so pumped for my 60s because I'm living on purpose now. Because of the boundaries, I'm living on purpose. I'm like consciously choosing what I want in my life and what I don't want. And I don't think I understood how much I wasn't doing that before.
We are gonna take a quick turn here before I let you go because I could talk to you, Barb, for hours and hours.
Me too. Yeah.
So there's gonna be a part 2. Let me just go
Oh,
ahead and put
goody.
that out there. But we're gonna talk tattoos for a moment because
Okay.
I love tattoos. I have a lot of
Awesome.
tattoos. I'm in short sleeves today, so you can see some of
Nice.
my tattoos.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you don't have any tattoos. However, you have a pretty cool tattoo story, and
Yeah.
I would love for you to share that. And I'm going to go ahead and give the teaser to those of you who are listening versus watching. You're going to want to go to YouTube because you're going to want to see what Barb is going to show us. So,
Okay.
Barb, take it away.
Okay, so I have two stories. The first one is about me, and the second one is about my brother. So the first one is, I remember in my early 30s, like, I love tattoos. It's never been something that's ever appealed to me. And I was at a party, and there was a woman who was telling a story of how she got a tattoo of the sun on her shoulder when she finished her therapy. And I was like, I love the idea of a tattoo to mark a milestone like that, and especially the sun. And then she got a tattoo of the moon when her brother died. And now I'm going to get a little teary eyed because my other story is about my brother Pat, who died in 2006. And he was a double winner. He had a substance use problem and a mental health problem. So actually, dual diagnosis is the way we describe it. He happened to die of Legionnaire's disease. I think of it just happens to be the way that he died, but he was bipolar and he was much more on the depressive end, and he really didn't want to be here. And he had several tattoos on the forearm,
Forearm.
on the forearm of his front arm. And so I'm going to share my screen right now to show the picture. This is literally the picture on his deathbed of his tattoos. And luckily, my then sister-in-law, she has tattoos. My other brother has tattoos. Was like, we have to take a picture of Pat's tattoos. So the bottom one, which is a little bit blurry, is an hourglass with wings on it. The one above it is an infinity symbol. The one above that is a snake with its tail in its mouth. And then the other one is like a moon with stars around it. And I feel so, like, I cannot tell you how grateful I feel that she thought to snap that picture and that I have it. And in my bedroom, next to where I can see from my bed, I have a photo of that. And then above it is the last picture that I ever took of Pat, which was actually at my birthday party 3 months before he died. And I wrote, his birth and death dates, and I wrote a man of wisdom, depth, and humor. And what's interesting, Claudia, is both of my brothers have tattoos. And if you had ever asked me, like, growing up, first of all, I'm 60, and tattoos were not like ubiquitous in culture the way they are, now, even when my brothers got their tattoos. If you had ever said to me, would either of your brothers get tattoos? No. I was just like, what? You got a tattoo? Like, it was just astonishing to me. And it was so important to him that he got it on his forearm, like he wanted everybody to see it, like, all the time. And he had stories about them. At this point, I've forgotten the stories about the tattoos, but I look at those tattoos on the wall every single day. And so, yeah, super, super meaningful to me. And I have so many friends that have, some of whom are covered from head to toe. And actually one of my friends from recovery came into the program at 519 pounds. He's lost more than half of his weight. And it's really interesting to see. He's covered with tattoos. It's really interesting to see what's happened to his tattoos. They're still cool looking,
Is there a possibility that you will ever get a tattoo?
It's not likely, but I would never say no to anything. And if I ever did, it would be to mark something. It would be like a milestone marker of some kind, like my brother's best friend got my brother's name tattooed. He had all kinds of tattoos, tattooed in gigantic letters, in fact, on his forearm. I could see something like that. I would probably get something delicate and inconspicuous
So you're
that,
saying
like,
there's a
I
chance.
know about. Yeah, so there's a chance, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Never say no.
Barb, where can people find you? So if they want to learn more about your story, if they want to talk to you about coaching, if they want to hear your podcast, if they want to watch the Hallmark Channel with you, no longer in secret, where can they find you?
So my favorite place to hang out on social media is on Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. I have tons of free shit on boundaries, tons and tons and tons of free shit on boundaries there. And then in the link in my bio there, you can get to everything from me. But I do offer a free 30-minute Better Boundaries conversation with people if they're thinking about doing coaching with me. I do private and group coaching. And then really, since you're already listening to a podcast, you should be listening to my podcast. It's called Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. If you happen to be, like, on the computer right now and you can't remember it, you can go to fragmentedtowhole.com and it will take you right to the page on my website. And there's links to, like, every single app that there is. But if you can only remember one thing, go to my podcast, because that tells you all the other, how to get to me and all the other things. And and if you find me from here, let me know.
Sounds great. Barb, you have been an absolute pleasure to talk with.
Oh,
I
thank you. This has
appreciate
been
your
great.
time. I know I've had a really great time. You have been super inspirational, really informative,
Thank
and
you.
I hope that you'll be game for a part 2.
I'm in. Name the date. I'm in. I would love to. I would love to. I could talk about this shit forever. And you also ask really great questions, and it definitely seems like we're kindred spirits. So I'd love to stay connected.
I agree. So thank you so much. I appreciate you.
All right.
If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media so you'll never miss what's going on. Remember, until next week, you are strong enough, you are worth it. Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. And on YouTube, we're on the Spear Talk channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strong Enough Pod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or a future guest, please reach out at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.